Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning, and I concur with all that Rachel said already. First of all, thank each of you for your dedication, for your willingness to volunteer and help and be good citizens this week. You will find that you have become now the greatest advocate for the federal judiciary to the legislature, because nothing's more important than citizens speaking as constituents to their direct legislators about the needs of a third branch of government. So thank all of you for what you've done. I expressly want to say thanks to Rachel and her great leadership, and Bruce Moyer for making this the most successful week of Capitol Hill Day for the FBA that I've seen in my career. I've been astounded by the participation this week and how successful it was. It turns out it was very easy, and all the legislators and their staff were appreciative that we were so efficient in the use of their time. And I'll let Bruce convey all that message to you as well. But thank you for all that you've done, and I want you to know that I'm right there with you. I met with my legislators this week, and I wouldn't miss it every year. I do the same thing. I've gotten to meet with them pretty much every year, for goodness, probably about 10, 15 years, because before there was a Capitol Hill Day, I was doing that, and I remembered the day that we would talk with Bruce and others about, yeah, this Capitol Hill Day would be a great idea. And it has really taken off in the last few years under the leadership of Rachel. So thank you for all that you've done. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rachel and Bruce to convey the debriefing.
Thank you, West. I'm Bruce Moyer with the Council for Government Relations, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and a special thanks to West, to Rachel, and to Kathy for all of your leadership and your support that you've provided this past week. This was a fantastic week, and the reason why we can say already that we know it was fantastic is through all the reports that many of you have filed on your meetings. We've received over 70 reports of meetings that have been held with members of Congress, and I'm sure there are more reports that will be coming in. So thank you for your prompt attention and following through on that. And also thank you for what I know will be an ongoing relationship that all of you have with the staffers and with the members of Congress with whom you met. Some of you have indicated in your report feedback that staffers wanted to be kept apprised of ongoing developments. So of course, when a judgeships bill is introduced and you learn of that through us, we'll want you to indicate to those members of Congress and their staff that a bill has been introduced. The same applies to judicial security, et cetera, et cetera. So our updates that we provide on a monthly basis and even more timely developments are ones that we will keep you informed of and ask you to pass on that information in that ongoing relationship you have with congressional offices with whom you met this week. Our purpose today is to receive from you the most pertinent feedback. Your feedback forms have been excellent, but we'd also like to hear from you in terms of your more personal impressions. And to that end, we asked a question of you that is, what is the most important thing you learned from your meetings this week? And what would you want FBA National Headquarters to know about that? And because both West and Rachel walked the talk this week and participated actively in meetings, I'm going to turn it back to Rachel if she would answer that question from her own experience. And then I think Kathy's going to be looking for hand-ups from all of you as to how you would engage in our conversation. And it truly is a conversation for feedback and support and fellowship among all of us after a very shared and collective experience this past week. So Rachel, it's yours.
Thank you, Bruce. And before I answer the question directly, I wanted to thank you, not only for your leadership, but also all of the time and work you put into preparing those amazing materials that made our advocacy efforts so much easier and so much more meaningful and thoughtful. I can't begin to tell you, as part of my response, how thankful the staff were that all of us were so well prepared and that we had something so substantive to provide as a follow-up to them. So Bruce, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So to answer the question, what did I learn this week? A couple of takeaways on my end, and I would love for Wes to comment as well before I open it up. First, we were able in Texas to have the actual legislators participate in numerous calls of ours, which was a little different than years past. To have that degree of enthusiasm and interest. We also learned that many of our legislators serve on major committees, such as the House Judiciary Committee and the House Appropriations Committee. And many of them were not only lawyers, but also JAGs and state court judges in Texas. So their appreciation for and understanding of the issues that lawyers and judges faced was an excellent exchange. The last takeaway I had was that there wasn't an issue on the macro items that we presented, such as judicial security. It was more some of the nuances that they wanted to see worked out from a partisan standpoint. So that was a takeaway. And the last point, and I've seen this evolve actually over the last couple of years, was more of a collaborative bipartisan approach to these issues. And in fact, we learned from Senator Cornyn's office that on immigration, there is legislation, it's Senate Bill 1358. And specifically, it's called the bipartisan border legislation. And the reason they made it bipartisan was so that the American public knew that this was definitely an across the aisle effort. And it dovetails into our Article 1 immigration court because that bill specifically addresses the quick processing of asylum claims. So by doing that, that's just another way to decrease the burden on our Article 3 courts, and that could be a nice way to tie in our Article 1 court advocacy efforts. So with that, Wes, the floor is yours.
Well, I'll be quick. I will add two things that I learned this week talking to my legislators. One is I spoke to a congressman who's from Reno. I'm in Las Vegas, but he's the main congressman for Northern Nevada. He was a JAG. I didn't realize that. I knew he was in the military, but I didn't realize that he served many years as a JAG. As I spoke to him specifically, he lit up and was excited, really is the only word I can explain, to and willing to help the judiciary. His passion for the constitutional responsibilities of the legislature for our third branch is clear as mine and yours. And he serves on the Appropriations Committee, and I think he will be a great resource in the months and years ahead. I also learned that I knew this, but I learned just how valuable the opinions and the insights of you as federal practitioners who have been practicing in federal court for years, if not decades, the insight and experience that you bring to these young staffers in particular, and to the legislators themselves, is deeply insightful. And they just don't hear or know these stories until you tell them. And so when I conveyed some of the stories that I experienced in my practice, literally, I conveyed one of the stories I've shared before. A Canadian client who had a trade secret case literally discovered that our federal court system in the United States is almost broken, because when you have a matter that's of imperative and timely nature, if someone files a motion in federal court today, you may be completely stalled for up to 6 months, if not closer to a year, at least in California and Nevada and other states out west, where the caseloads are approaching well over 700-800 cases per judge. And that's just their reality. And as a result, I don't know if our legislators appreciated just how critical this time is for the federal court system. And it's only your stories that convey that. And so I conveyed mine. I assume that you conveyed yours. And we should keep conveying those stories. I see a message already from the folks in California where they say we need to be more assertive with the AO to have them ask for the money they need. I concur. Yeah, we need more judgeships. That needs to happen. We need to make that happen. It's been 30 years since we've had new judgeships, and the time is well past the moment of critical stage. And so I hope we can get that done and help the AO in their efforts. But those are the two things I learned. My congressman is a JAG and wants to help. more than I ever anticipated, and that the stories that you share make a big difference to the legislators and to the third branch. Rachel and Bruce.
Kathy, do you want to call on people who may have raised their hand?
Pardon me, I don't see that anyone has raised their hand.
Oh, well,
We have
I see Kelly Loudon has.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry, Kelly. Yep. Kelly, please go ahead.
Kathy, you didn't miss anything. I just raised my hand a second ago when you said no one had raised their hand yet. So.
Oh, good. Thank you.
My name is Kelly Loudon. I'm a member of the Government Relations Committee and a member of the Minnesota chapter. And it was my pleasure to participate with a very large group from Minnesota in Capitol Hill Day. A couple takeaways for me were, first of all, I really appreciate the encouragement that our leaders had to reach out to our chief judge in the District of Minnesota in advance of Capitol Hill Day. We had a really productive conversation a little over a week ago with our chief judge in the District of Minnesota, Chief Judge Thunheim, and he gave us tremendous insight. He was very generous with his time. We spent over an hour with him talking through the different issues that were the issues we were going to be sharing with our congressional delegation. And he gave us great local insight into how these issues are affecting the judges in Minnesota. And when we met with our congressional representatives, those personal stories of what our judges have experienced were really meaningful for our representatives to hear. And I think really allowed us to be much more tailored in the way that we talked about these issues, not just using the talking points that Bruce and others prepared for us, but being able to take those talking points and then add personal stories from experiences of our judges, including a story or an ongoing issue that one of our local judges has faced with respect to someone making threats against her life. So I think that really personalized it for our representatives to know that a judge that they know and were involved in getting appointed has had her life threatened. So I wanted to share that. And then I think too, I was really grateful for the opportunity to do this virtually. I've participated in Capitol Hill Day in person before, which was wonderful, but being able to bring a broader perspective of people to the conversation was really beneficial. We had a very diverse delegation from Minnesota, including covering a wider geographic area, which enabled our team to meet with more representatives from Minnesota than we normally could, because typically people who have participated have been just from the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So we had a broader geographic representation. And then we also had members from our chapter who can bring various perspectives, like the Indian, a Native American who participated, who could really speak to the ways these issues impact Indian country and tribal law. So I wanted to just give a shout out to the organization for this being virtual and say that in a lot of ways it opened up some doors that we haven't had in the past.
Oh, great. Thank you for sharing with us, Kelly. Judge Burkhat, I believe you would like to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I was the lone representative for our delegation from Delaware, which isn't surprising because it's such a small state. But now that we are represented in the White House, I can tell you that the meetings I had with the senators' offices, Senator Coons, who is on the Judiciary Committee and very influential on that committee, Senator Carper's office, and I was happy to see Congresswoman Blunt Rochester took the time to actually attend the meeting with me. All three groups, all three meetings were very, very positive. I kept getting thumbs up from Congresswoman Blunt Rochester saying, we are so in tune with what the federal bar is asking for here, and she's going to do everything she can to push these along. The reason I raised my hand, I wanted to point out with the meeting with Senator Coons' office, their staffers and the judiciary aide in particular raised the issue with Senator Young's bill, Senate 4779, which specifically addresses more judgeships. And she mentioned to me that the pushback is coming from the opposite side of the aisle. in particular the two senators, Cruz and Cornyn from Texas, who do not want right now, under this administration, any more judgeships being authorized. They're making it a partisan issue. They said, the staffer said, look, if this does happen and more judges are authorized, we're not going to see that till 2025 at the earliest. However, what they asked for, and I put this into the report, that the FBA, if we can get documentation showing what this is costing litigants and the public in places like Texas in particular, what the costs are to them, that could carry a lot of weight in trying to push this through even sooner. So I'm reaching out to the FBA to say, hey, can we get this documentation? Can we monetize this in some way that could be used by Senator Coons in discussions with the opposite side of the aisle to try to get more judgeships before 2025? And then lastly, because I know our time is short, in fact, I've got a hearing in 37 minutes. Immigration Court, the Article 1, again, they were very supportive, but they want to see some more documentation from the FBA to support the reasons why. We had, for some of the other issues, letters. Vice President Kamala Harris's letter was very helpful. The additional letters were there, but any other documentation. So again, the meetings were very receptive. They want follow-up from the FBA. So I appreciate having the opportunity to do this. This is my first year doing it, and I thought it was very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us, Judge Burkett. Oliver, I believe you have a
Yes.
few...
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just quickly to follow up on that, on the topic of follow-up, I have an email that I've been sending as a follow-up to the meetings. It has the handout materials for just the 6 issues that I share with the members or their staff that we met with. And it has more information about the Immigration Court, of course, as part of it. And then I usually direct them to our association's website, where there's model legislation and more information based on the review of these issues by our immigration law section and others. So if anybody wants to have that, what I did is I took those 6 issues from the Capitol Hill Day Handbook with the title page for each. I created 6 different PDFs. I've got it in bullet points in an email. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, then I can share that with you, so you could just cut and paste and forward the email as a follow-up to the offices you met with. I thought that Kelly's points were all great. A big value is getting to connect with our chief judges. We had 2 direct conferences, one with the chief judge of the Northern District of Florida, one with the Southern District of Florida. We received feedback from the Middle District of Florida through our circuit vice president in the area. And some of the things we heard about judicial security were alarming. We also found an article, a recent article that talked about a 400% spike in judicial threats from the years 2015 to 2019. So that's information I can provide. What I learned was we had a direct meeting with Congresswoman Lois Frankel in Florida. She's on the Appropriations Committee. She told us that there is a deadline for members of the Appropriations Committee to submit their requests, and that's something that we should be mindful of in the future, so that we could provide information. She was generally supportive of our various measures. And then I found out, and I had never done this before, but I found out that you can sign up for alerts on, I think, congress.gov for bills. So I would certainly, in the interest of staying in touch over the year as issues develop, of course, we'll get that from the Government Relations Committee of the FBA and from Bruce and others. But if you personally want to get updates and alerts whenever these bills, whenever there's developments, you can sign up there. I signed up, I think it was for HR 2679 regarding the charter amendments to the foundation of the Federal Bar Association, which was introduced on April 20th. And so in that way, I'm going to try to keep in touch with our members that we met with. And I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Michael Vitale and all the leaders from across the state of Florida for really covering the map with our meetings. Everyone did a fantastic job, and it was a really successful week, I think, for Florida. We met with most, if not all, members of the Judiciary Committee and the House Appropriations Committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver, for sharing that with us. Jeff Cox, I see that you have your hand raised. Jeffrey?
I do, yes. Yes. I wanted to just add a comment regarding our meeting with Senator Portman, Senator Portman's staff. I'm in Dayton, Ohio, and our meeting with his chief staff person is someone who we have met with several times over, and it was a very productive meeting. Senator Portman is concluding his service in the Senate in 2022, and as a consequence of that, I thought it would be useful to talk with his staff person, Megan Harrington, about possible swan songs for the senator. And she expressed particular interest in the judicial security legislation. I said if Senator Portman would be interested in a nice coda to his service in the Senate, this particular bill is one that ought to enjoy wide bipartisan support. And the need for judicial security seems to me to have been underscored by the activities that happened in Washington in January this year. So there is a heightened understanding of that threat potential, not only in DC, but around the country, as federal buildings have been under attack or been used as focal points for pushback on various issues. So she was taking a lot of notes. I think it was a useful point. The other point I made with her on this particular subject was to the extent that this type of legislation could be disaggregated from some of the other omnibus bills that have a lot of amendments and various pieces of legislation that don't necessarily hew directly to the core legislation. To the extent this one could be disaggregated, this might be something that could move through Congress fairly quickly. It would have wide bipartisan support, in my estimation, and would be greatly appreciated by the federal judiciary. So that was a useful part of our conversation. I just wanted to report on that.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We appreciate that. Aideen, I see that you have raised your hand.
Yes. Can everyone hear me? Great. Thanks, Kathy. And thank you, Bruce, Wes, Rachel. This was a fantastic Capitol Hill Day. I have attended Capitol Hill Day in the past, DC, walking from the House to the Senate, being able to attend the gallery sessions afterwards, and was thinking that Capitol Hill Day in a virtual format would be something less. And I have to be pleasantly surprised that it actually wasn't. I think this week was tremendous. I received a lot of value, and I was so privileged and honored to be able to participate in the events. For those of you who might not know me, I am an equity partner at the Stinson firm in Minneapolis. I also serve on our national board of directors for the FBA and am very involved in the Minnesota chapter as an officer and as a board member as well. The takeaways that I have from Capitol Hill Day this year are certainly with respect to planning and making sure that we are working as a team to convey the issues of the FBA as laid out for us. I have to give extreme thanks and kudos to Kelly Lawton. She is a past president of our Minnesota chapter. You heard from her earlier, and I have to echo all of her remarks. We had a really thoughtful and pragmatic strategy as to how we were going to handle Capitol Hill Day by not only trying to set up our meetings with our senators, but also our representatives with the House. And the way that we were able to do that was really with Kelly and the volunteers from our Minnesota chapter who stepped up to make ourselves available to talk with our chief judge, to make ourselves available to attend the Senate meetings and any other meetings that we're able to fit our schedule. So thank you to Kelly. Thank you to all of our delegates from our chapter who were able to do it. One of the benefits of having a virtual Capitol Hill Day, unlike what we've done in the past, is that we were able to spread out our meetings across the week instead of trying to have everything in one day. And so I think that helped us have as much participation as possible. It helped us have a really diverse delegation as well. And it also helped us be very specific as to which issues we volunteered to handle so that we could own those issues and speak very credibly to the staffers and be responsive to them if they had any questions. So the planning that we did really paid off. One of the things I also wanted to mention with respect to judicial security, the staffers were really supportive of the entire FBA agenda, as they had been in the past. But the fact that we were able to meet with our chief judge and he was able to provide additional statistics, anecdotes, was really well received by us as we listened, but extremely well received by the staffers when they heard us telling the story and making the FBA issue agenda come alive. One of the staffers had mentioned that with respect to additional funding for court security, the appropriations bill timing, I think Oliver kind of touched on this. The staffer thought the timing on that is mid-June. So the timing is perfect if there's a way for one of the members of Congress to basically sponsor a bill and include increased funding for judicial security as part of that appropriations bill. The staffer did not know who is backing that appropriations bill on either the House or the Senate side. So if anyone has that information, the Minnesota chapter would really appreciate receiving it, because sounds like the staffer who's from Senator Amy Klobuchar's office, sounds like that's something that his office would be willing to back, and that Senator Klobuchar would be willing to back specifically. So if we have that information, I think that would be a good takeaway for us to have and then to share. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aideen. I don't see other hands raised at the moment. Everybody, please speak up. Bruce, do you have anything that you would like to add at this point, or comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the feedback we've received thus far. And let me just speak to a couple of things to consolidate what's been said. The importance of follow-up is critical, and there is a kind of a trio of follow-up actions we strongly urge you to undertake. The first is a thank you email that would be sent to each of the staffers with whom you met, and Oliver's template will be extremely valuable. I would suggest that Oliver, if we could, we would just send your template out to everyone and be able to capture everyone as recipients of that, rather than asking people to contact you directly. Knowing Oliver as I do, I'm sure it is an excellent product, and it's thorough and yet as succinct as it should be. The second of the three follow-up items that we've talked about has been not only conversation with the chief judge at the front end before your meetings, but then also a follow-up meeting with the chief judge, both to thank her or him for the value of the input that they provided. And even if you did not have the prelude meeting with the chief judge, still seek a follow-up meeting with the chief judge to make her or him aware of your activity, of the conversation, the dialogue, to loop them in. So that's very important. Once again, the congressional staff and lawmaker, second, the chief judge, and then third, and most obviously, your own chapter. Your own chapter should be aware of what you have done. and to use every communication vehicle within the chapter to be able to give them some detailed information about not only the importance of Capitol Hill Day as we try to continue to sustain the momentum to next year, but also the personal actions and leadership that each of you undertook in making it such a successful event. So those three follow-ups are very important, each in their own way. And that's what I would have in terms of where we are at this point. I'd be happy if we have some time to share with you a little bit more information about judicial security and judgeships, but I'm going to hold off on that. I can provide that to you in writing, and if we don't have time to be able to get to that. Once again, the dialogue and the conversation we have during this time together is the most important.
Oh, Beth Persky has raised her hand in the meantime. Beth?
Here I am. I had trouble figuring out how to raise my hand before. Just a couple of things, as we did have within California, which I coordinated, we had designated people in each district to meet with the chief judges, and that was very useful in terms of ascertaining judicial priorities. And what I found really interesting, speaking with Judiciary Council, is the processes involved, and that it takes just a simple majority vote to fill judicial vacancies, but legislation and 60 votes are required for additional judgeships. And also, one judge in the Central District had asked if a temporary judgeship could be made permanent, and we were told that would require a bill, and it's not that easy. So those are interesting takeaways from that. We also had an issue of on the ECF in terms of the fees for PACER, because that would need to be offset by other things, and it could end up raising court filing costs if Congress doesn't allocate additional money. That was a point made by one of our district representatives.
Thank you, Beth, very much.
Sure.
Kelly, I believe you'd like to add something at this point?
Yeah, not to take up too much time, but I appreciated the comments that were made by Judge Burkett from Delaware regarding kind of what's happening on the Judiciary Committee and what the pushes and pulls are with respect to creating more judgeships. So I just wanted to suggest that perhaps those of us who participated in meetings with senators from senators who serve on the Judiciary Committee, that we might consider creating some type of a follow-up subgroup where we could dialogue with one another, be it from Texas, Rachel, with Judge Burkett. Senator Klobuchar serves on the Judiciary Committee and is very interested in moving on this as well. If we could help partner kind of behind the scenes as members of the FBA who've met with each of these senators who are interested in trying to make things happen and working across the lines, we might be able to help push that along.
Yes, very good.
Great. Thanks for your comments, Kelly. Is there anyone else who would like to chime in? Anybody on the telephone who can't raise your hand? No virtual hands? Rachel, is there anything that you would like to add at this point?
No, I just am thrilled by all of the feedback, and what we've learned from everyone's input is similar to what we've read on the forums. It's always nice to hear that firsthand. I believe that the bipartisanship and that collaboration is paramount, and we've seen that evolve more and more over the last several years to try and get back to that point of collaboration in the Senate. And I applaud Kelly in her suggestion to help facilitate that as we can as members of the FBA. Being intimately familiar with both of the Texas senators and their staff, There's some interesting dynamics there, as I'm sure everyone can appreciate, but I look forward to helping everyone navigate that and being collaborative in that process. So I think it's key. Bruce and West.
This is West. Let me just add one more thing. And thank you, Kelly, for that wise insight. I hope we can next, with Bruce's assistance and others, really start to strategize and create a plan to make this happen. I've been doing these meetings for a long time, and the only frustrating part about any of it, which is something everybody experiences, is you can have these meetings, but at the end of the day, we really should be graded by what happens that changes, that's better. And maybe it is time for the FBA to have some of these ideas forged together and conveyed to different senators from different sides of the aisle to really make something happen, especially with the judgeships. While Kelly was talking, I was thinking of a conversation that I got to have with one of the senators from Utah. I was visiting with some of our Utah delegates, and the senator was there, and our conversation helped change his mind. I know that because he was thinking one way and then he changed his mind a little bit later. But it's that type of engagement that we might be able to go to our senators in Texas and California and Minnesota and get them on board to some kind of plan that the best plan truly is probably one that's staggered over time. So there's some judges this year, there's some judges in 3 or 4 years. I'm always interested to hear how one side or the other just says, no, we don't need new judges, because this exact conversation just 2 years ago was the opposite side saying there's no way we're ever getting new judges. So it just switches back and forth who's making that argument. And we've got to overcome that. That's been the problem for now 30 years. So I hope we can take these great ideas and strategize and put them into action and help our legislators make the changes that will make a difference to our federal courts.
Thanks, West.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Bruce, were you about to speak?
No, I would be happy to, but I noticed that Christine Jordan
Yes, Christine.
has her hand up, and I think one other person, Nadine, as well.
Christine? Hi. Oh, you're on mute. Hold on. Okay,
All right, is that better?
yes, I was
Okay.
trying to unmute you and I could not.
Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties. So I'm Christine Jordan. I was proud to have the opportunity to join the Minnesota delegates to this year. This is my first time. And I believe I'm the native that Kelly was, Native American that Kelly was speaking of. And I had a wonderful opportunity. You know, I'm a constituent of Representative Betty McCollum and also of Senator Smith. And, you know, when we were talking to Representative McCollum's office, some of the things that came up were, you know, having the numbers. They just wanted the numbers right away. So a couple of things that I could procure, but weren't necessarily, you know, and I've made the statement that this is from the Judicial Conference website, was the congressional budget that they had. And so I was just going to direct them to that website. And, you know, I wanted to, you know, I made sure to connect with Kelly about bringing the perspective as far as Indian law and Indian country. And, you know, just having, there's that unique relationship and having, you know, the expediency of justice as well. And, you know, the offices that we spoke of are very supportive of the government-to-government relationships between the United States and the tribal nations. And one of the things that I did point out for, you know, I'm not sure who's on here from Oklahoma, and I just wanted to touch on that, is that with recent Supreme Court rulings that have affected Oklahoma, I know that like federal prosecutions have increased from 300 to 400%. So just having that strain, you know, in that area not to mention the overall strain on the judiciary in general. But I was happy to bring that perspective as a practitioner in Indian law and involved in the community, both through the FBA and through the ABA, and here in Minnesota as well. So I would just, I could say that there could be a recommendation for next year. It's not a political item, but it's just also identifying this other element that the federal judiciary also oversees. But again, I know that these are the recommendations through the FBA nationally and also through the Judicial Conference, but I was happy to bring that perspective. And I really did have a great time working with everybody from my state. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Adine, I believe you would like to say a few more words.
Thanks. I just had a question. You know, as we've recognized, we have certain agenda issues that tend to carry on from Capitol Hill Day, years after years. And so there's strength in numbers. We know that there are certain issues on the agenda that are backed not just by the FBA, but other large organizations and constituencies, you know, including the American Bar Association. The American Bar Association supports the immigration courts being Article I courts. We know that the ABA is also supportive with respect to judicial security and any funding that's related to enhancements with respect to judicial security. So in addition to having follow-up conversations with those who are part of Capitol Hill Day for the FBA, which is a great idea, I wonder if we should also be making sure to reach out to the other bar associations, mainly the ABA, if there's a way for us to join efforts and maybe have a presented proposal to make to the congressional offices, maybe again strengthen numbers, if there's a way for us to build on that momentum and have other organizations join us in our efforts versus trying to do it alone. I think that might hopefully help us with some traction on the issues that we've been seeing on our agenda over the years, immigration being one, and then the newer one that's really important, it has a lot of support, judicial security.
Thank you, Adine. Under President Maria Vathis, there was a joint letter that went out with the ABA and an immigration association as well, Bruce and West, if I'm not mistaken. And that really strikes to the heart of what you just said, Adine, that collaboration when it's appropriate with other organizations and backing that. And then Ashley Ballou is our ABA delegate for the FBA. And I know she's on the ground and reports back to us on the GRC regularly. Bruce, would you like to add to that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And Adine, that's an excellent comment. For the last 3 to 4 years, the FBA has organized and participated actively in a coalition of 5 legal organizations, including the ABA, in support of an Article I immigration court. These have been meetings that have usually focused on legislative strategy, on sharing information, and on the content of the model bill. Keeping in mind that it was the FBA who, with hard work and draftsmanship, produced the model bill that then became the subject of many meetings that the ABA, those other groups, American Immigration Lawyers Association, American Association of Immigration Judges, FBA and ABA, participated in with House staff going over line by line our model bill. So that kind of constructive work certainly has yielded results, not yet reaching the finish line of introduction of a bill, but we think very close to that. The same type of work can be applied to judicial security in the creation of a coalition of support. And I'd like to just for a moment just talk a bit about judicial security. And while we think that it's such a noble objective to enhance judicial security, there are lots of problems attending to the issue, both political in a partisan sense, as well as substantive. just as examples, on the political side, there have been frayed edges with regard to the aspirations and desires of Republicans who felt that Democrats did not take into account their interest in introducing the legislation last year that was introduced on a partisan basis, that is, without any bipartisanship. And I won't get into any further detail, but just to indicate how that can erode the situation. Secondly, there have been, especially since January 6th, expressions of interest in broadening the coverage of the Judicial Security Bill to include members of Congress, but also to include federal prosecutors and other federal law enforcement personnel, many of who've suffered threats and, in some cases, attacks upon their safety. There are also concerns substantively about the degree to which the federal government can control information on the internet. This brings into play Section 230. It also raises to an extent to which the real remedies should lie at the kinds of records we're talking about involving personal information of judges are largely tax records, election records, DMV records. You get the point. It all deals with local and state records. There is a role for federal legislation, nonetheless, particularly appropriations legislation. And I might and will provide further information about the legislative process, but they're not typically appropriations bills that are introduced by individual members of Congress. The bill is written within committee, and that's why membership by a lawmaker on an appropriations committee or subcommittee that's the center of attention. And that takes us back to the excellent idea that Kelly had raised with regard to a working group of our members in states involving members of the Judiciary Committee on the state side, on the Senate side, and then possibly a similar working group of chapters whose respective lawmakers are on the House Judiciary Committee. We could additionally establish a working group in the same vein with regard to appropriations. So thank you, Kelly, for raising that. And this would be certainly an opportune time based upon the momentum we have at this point and the need to get these bills introduced following the continued study and draftsmanship that's going on, we know right now, on judicial security in both the House and Senate committees.
Thank you, Bruce. Robert Rando, I see that you would like to make a comment.
Yeah, yes, thank you. A few comments I'd like to make. Just following up on what Bruce had said with respect to the security legislation, with one of the representatives that we met with was Representative Espilot, who is on the House Appropriations Committee. And in all our meetings, we had suggested, we endorsed and advocated support for the bill and potential co-sponsorship. We took it a step further and suggested, if not that route, perhaps including it in one of the bills that are already pending, one of the set of the bills, and Congressman Espilot said that he would look into that, and he certainly was interested in doing that. And again, I understand what Bruce is saying about some of the pushback on the political side as well as on the substantive side, understanding that the ACLU has some issues with the legislation. So that's the point I wanted to make on that. With respect to both sides of the aisle, or, again, on the political aspect, Congressman Garbarino's deputy chair that we met with certainly indicated that they were very supportive, and that they're on the other side of the aisle of that legislation. And And so and just in general, my experience, and as Bruce and Wes and know, and Rachel, I've been doing this probably since we began, right? But what I found, despite what we all see reported, there seemed to be bipartisan support for just about everything that we were advocating. And it was great to see that. And I agree, a couple of our legislators actually were able to participate in the meetings, and that was wonderful. Whereas in person, it's usually more staff than the legislators. And just as a point of personal privilege, as I said, I've been doing this for many years. My team that I did it with this year, my belief is that I was the only one that had done it before. And I'm very excited and proud to say that every one of the members that were with me did such a fantastic job, outstanding. And I just would like to take a moment to call them out. Dina Miller, our Second Circuit VP, Giuseppe Franzella, the chapter president for the EDNY, Troy Kessler, chapter president of EDNY, Nancy Morriso, chapter president, SDNY. And in particular, I'd like to call it Dan Phillips. He was the SDNY chapter member and member of the immigration law section, and he was fabulous in the way he was able to articulate the issues for the Article 1 court. And I'll just say to everyone from the past that knows this, he certainly picked up the baton from Abigail, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Bruce, did you see Aidene's comment in the chat?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
She's asking, with respect to the nuances that you mentioned about appropriations and how they are handled, asking if we could put some sort of fact sheet on the website
yes.
with that information.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And also, let me just take the opportunity, because I know we're at 12:59. If any of you have any need for follow-up information as requested by staff, and you did not have it available in your Capitol Hill Day handbook materials, please indicate that on your feedback form, and we will be reading and thoroughly evaluating and responding to every request for additional information. And whether that goes back through you or through me, we will work that out with you. I would prefer it go back through you, since you said you would attend to that. But I just want to impress upon you, we cautioned you during the prep time, don't make up an answer to a question. Say, that's a good question, I'll get back to you. If that arose, this is what we're talking about. We will get that information to you so you can be as responsive as possible to those with whom you met.
Thank you, Bruce. Since we are at the end of the hour, I would actually just like to say a couple of words quickly about how much I have enjoyed working this year on this Capitol Hill Day. As many of you know, I took it over from a departed staff member, and I hated that she left, but it was so great that I got to work on this project. It is our last year with Bruce, and I've told him, I said, well, if this is my last chance to work with you, I'll take it. I've known him for more than 20 years, since the first time I worked at the FBA, and it's just been great. I mean, this has been a terrific Capitol Hill Day week. Everyone has done so much hard work, and I really appreciate it. I work for the FBA because I really care about what you all do. I care about what we're out there fighting for. I care about our civil rights, our LGBT law, and I'm a labor law junkie. So I love to read about these things, and especially our legislative issues. So, we so appreciate your support of the FBA and for really getting out there and advocating for us. It's been wonderful. So if anyone has any other questions, you can email Bruce, grc@fedbar.org, email me, and we'll do what we can to take care of it. If you need documents that you need to send, just email me. I will get you what you need to send to your legislators. And with all that being said, I'll turn it over to Rachel to close us out.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you and Bruce and President Allen, as well as everyone who not only participated this week, but who was present today to offer more of your insights, your time and dedication to the FBA, and as Kathy mentioned, all of the issues that we represent on behalf of the judiciary is truly valued. And we look forward to the collaborations and following through on any of your needs, as well as providing information as follow-ups to keep the discussion going. So with that, I hope all of the mothers who are present today have a very wonderful Mother's Day on Sunday. And I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. And thank you again.